Updates from previous minutes.
There are none.
Message from the Information Council Office.
Information Commissioner's Office has stated that the 2019 annual report has been published.
Opening remarks, Councilman.
To the Bermuda Construction Safety Council members and distinguished delegates. On this Heroes Day, I would like to show my appreciation to His Excellency the Governor, George Rankin, the Honorable Premier David Burt, Minister of Health, Kim Wilson, Minister of Safety, Dwayne Keynes, and Commissioner of Police, Stephen Corberson. We meet today to consider questions of great moment. COVID-19 has demonstrated to the world its aggressive intentions and has already infected Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. And on top of that, it has reached our shores and claimed the lives of our very own citizens. Furthermore, overseas racial tensions have erupted from peaceful into violent protests. At the same time, we are here preparing for an upcoming global recession, and all of this at the beginning of our hurricane season. Councilwoman, I believe these are all just causes for our summer. As I refer to Section 1 of our Constitution, whereas every person in Bermuda is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, that is to say, has the right, whatever his race, place of origin, political opinions, color, creed, or sex, but subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for the public interest, to each and all of the following, namely, life, liberty, security of the person, protection of the law, freedom of conscience, of expression, and of assembly and association, and protection for the privacy of his home and other property from deprivation of property without compensation. As part of our national identity, it is imperative that we continue communicating with each other and educating ourselves and assessing the risks involved with our health, safety, and our environment, which is why we held the Open Forum, Bermuda College, 2018, the International Speakers Conference, 2019, and our 2020 Summit here on Headquarters Hill. For it can be said that not even a great threat can overcome a frail man when he is multiplied and supported by an army. As long as we support one another and render assistance to one another, an enemy cannot gain an advantage over you. But if you fight one another and dismantle each other, the enemy can break you like frail men one at a time. For the strength of the community is neither greater nor less than the courage of those that defend it. All of us dream of a life of happiness here together. Let us not pass from our memories those that have sacrificed their lives so that we may live free. Mr. Abbott Harris, Dame Lewis Brown Evans, Dr. Edgar Gordon, Dr. Roosevelt Brown, Sir Henry Tucker, Ms. Mary Prince, Mrs. Gladys Morrell, Sir Edward Richards, Dr. David Soul. Furthermore, I would like to make mention of those who continue to pioneer our island into what it is today. Sir John Swan, Dame Pamela Gordon, Dame Jennifer Smith, Mr. Alex Scott, Dr. Hewitt Brown, Mrs. Paula Cox, Mr. Craig Cannonier, Mr. Michael Duncan. And all of us support, respect, and admire the dedication and perseverance of our current Premier, the Honorable Edward David Burke. Although the Charter of Nations expresses the noblest aspirations of man, abjuration of force in the settlement of disputes between states, the assurance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, the safeguarding of international peace and security. However, as I said in the open forum, race is defined by language. I would challenge any philosopher, educator, historian, or attorney to that fundamental fact. I am willing to have the debate here or on any continent that all men were created equal under the law of nature. Man has walked the four corners of the earth and met up with himself. And everyone knows that in any building, temporary or structural, one of the most important elements it must contain is a base that is level. Otherwise, whatever is being constructed eventually will topple. And if anyone doesn't understand the definition of the word, they must first admit it to themselves. For it is written, not only in English, but in Amharic. On this day, new threats spread across our oceans and borders. Therefore, a new time of cooperation is required to ensure the growth and stability of our community. An economy that was stabilizing after a great recession has now been dealt a global pandemic. We must stop the track of COVID-19 and stop its spread. We must face a new emerging economic recession and prepare for a new hurricane season. And we must diffuse racial tensions through education and promoting our own national identity. If we are to return back to work, to seek prosperity, freedom and peace, and the dream of a life of happiness here together. Otherwise, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, Magnus Corpus, trial by jury, and our very own Constitution will remain but a fleeting illusion unless we turn those words into deeds. And it's up to us to absorb the wisdom of history and apply it to the issues of the present. As those before us made a better reality for us, we must in turn provide a better reality for a new generation. And maybe it can be said that there is not peace on earth. But as for us, we must remain true to ourselves. Bermuda is another word. We must continue to nurture our health, safety, environment, unity, talent, education, professionalism, and sophistication. For we are defined as healthcare workers, educators, accountants, and environmentalists here on our shores. We exemplify the ideal tourist destination, prime international business location, and the highest level of athletic competitors on the international stage who bring gold medals back home to Bermuda. For I believe that our close affinity will serve to be our strengths, and our values will be uplifted. If we continue to work together, we will overcome the threat of infectious diseases, diffuse racial tensions, and survive yet another hurricane season. We will restore economic productivity, and we will continue to lead in the direction of the just as we pursue our lifelong dreams of happiness here together. Thank you, Councilman.
So I recognize Seymour Broccoli from Jamaican Association.
Any remarks?
Any questions?
Speaking up on Brandon's speech, it's important that we stand unified in this international pandemic, moving forward, not only to fight it, combat it, but also to join forces, moving ahead, navigating the new way doing business, working, surviving, and preparing for anything else that may come along, similar to this pandemic, or even worse. I believe Bermuda, Jamaica, and indeed the world has done well in surviving this pandemic. I think we've learned from previous pandemic 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and we are much more informed now. We can communicate easily. And definitely we've handled this much better than previous times. We should learn from any mistakes we're making now as a community, as a country, as a universe, as a world, and definitely be more resilient, fighting, and succeeding moving forward. Best wishes for everyone, for Bermuda, Caribbean, the international world. Thank you.
Next, I recognize Louise Tennant from St. Kitts Nevis Concert. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. And also, I recognize Bernard Constant from Canada. I'm saying it correctly?
Yes, Kunst.
Yes, Constant.
That's fine. Well, happy to be part of this. I can't really say anything more on the situation and how dire it's been to everyone. Certainly, being a business owner myself and in the employment of a group of men and who become like family to you, it is most concerning that, you know, the outlook is not the rosiest at the moment. I do have to thank the government for the programs that they put into place, particularly with the income replacement. It was a great godsend because, again, you know, if you have your family and you know that they're not making any money, it hurts. So, but like I said, I'll have to agree with Seymour. Only together can we get through this and see how we're going to forward. Thank you.
Well, I could say good afternoon to the members of the Bermuda Construction Safety Council. Appreciate this offer, this invitation to share. I think that the idea that I have of sharing is more of sharing our heritage and the history of the Bermuda St. Kitts Nevis connection.
Yes.
And maybe through that story, I'm hoping that it will provide some resilience in our way that we see the future, because the people who we talk about in my St. Kitts connection came from difficult situations, and they made us who we are today, and that's why we're here.
Yes.
So I just want to share a bit of the history and the connections, and maybe give us some hope that our forefathers did it and they survived, and we can too. Okay? So really, if I step back in time, to understand the connection, we must walk back in time and understand the history of the islands. And what I'll do is just give a brief synopsis of some of the ways that we are connected in our history. Bermuda was discovered in 1511 by Juan de Bermudez. In 1609, the Sea Venture crashed on the rocks, and by accident, the English realized that this island existed, and by 1612, they sent back a group of settlers, about 56 settlers, to make Bermuda their own, a British island, and so that's why we're British today. St. Kitts was settled by Arawaks and Caribs, native Indian who came through from South America and settled throughout the region of the islands, and Columbus arrived in 1493. Christopher Columbus. He arrived in 1493, and Sir Thomas Warner, the British representative, arrived in St. Kitts in 1623, and from there on, St. Kitts was also made a British island. The French arrived thereafter as well, and so the island was shared by the French and the English, and they realized that the native people were going to be a threat, and there was a massacre of them in 1626. The French and the British joined together to get rid of the Native American Indians that were settling in St. Kitts. I share all of this because I wanted to share the history and the development of the islands. Of course, once the British and the French are in, the focus is on building the economy and using it to gain wealth. And the first focus was growing provisions, ground provisions, to be sent back to England or to be sent back to France. There was no gold and no silver mines in St. Kitts or Nevis. But they used the island, which had a rich soil because they're volcanic islands. The soil was very rich, and they used the islands to grow food. Eventually, with the onset of slavery, in the mid-1600s, they focused on planting sugar. So today, St. Kitts is Sugar City. Everybody knows it, or in the Caribbean at least, they know it as Sugar City. And St. Kitts, for many years thereafter, produced sugar in abundance and sold to England and to the Americas, and profited, or helped the plantations to profit from the sale of sugar. However, other countries, larger countries, began to also grow sugar, and this meant that St. Kitts began to get competition. And Britain began to buy their sugar from other places where they could get it cheaper and they could get it in abundance, such as Hispaniola, such as Dominican Republic, such as Puerto Rico, Cuba, Brazil. They'd buy the sugar cheaper. And so there was a struggle. Emancipation takes place in 1834, and with emancipation, the people realize there's no reparation being paid to the slaves to help them to get through the opportunities now, or the ex-slaves, the opportunities of building their lives on the island. And so there are masses of blacks that are without a job. What can they do? Life is in destitute situation where the country isn't making a whole lot of money from sugar plantations anymore. What can we do? Of course, the ships that sail in between the islands were looked on as a rescue point. And many Kittitians and Nevisians went off to Cuba, to Hispaniola, to Santo Domingo, to Brazil. They went to find work, to survive. And that was their opportunity, their first movement out of St. Kitts and Nevis for survival. They arrived and settled in those places on short-term basis, and they sent their monies home to help their locals. Now, Bermuda began to advertise. I think Bermuda was advertising around, I want to say the early 1800s, the late 1800s, advertising for industrious labor. And Kittitians heard and saw opportunities for moving. They recognized that they could move easily between the countries because there were cargo ships sailing from Canada right down through the Caribbean. Those were the lady boats coming down from Canada through the Caribbean, picking up goods and taking it either back to Canada or to the US on its way, stopping in at all of the islands. And St. Kitts and Nevis became that central point where people could get on the boat and maybe get off in Bermuda, maybe get off in the United States, maybe get off in Canada. And in Canada, it would be in Halifax, okay? And so this went on for many years. I could tell you that they traveled along the Gulf Stream, which is where we are connected, here in Bermuda, where we're connected with the Caribbean. It's the Gulf Stream that brings the hurricanes. It's the Gulf Stream that takes cargo, our ships up. It's the Gulf Stream that makes Bermuda the northernmost coral reef. So it is that point of relationship that began with the Caribbean way back in the mid-1800s. And it continued on once Bermuda needed industrious laborers to build the economy and to make Bermuda more modernized. They wanted people to come in to build forts, to rebuild the forts, to rebuild the docks in Hamilton, to work in dockyard at the British site that was there. And so Kittitians and Nevidians got on board. Slavery was ended, times were hard in St. Kitts, and they came to Bermuda and they settled. So we've got a number of Kittitian Bermudian connections here. If you don't mind, I would take a moment to just share with you some of the names. And there are many names, and might be that it might be some of your relatives, but I want to share with you some of the names. So bear with me, because it's a ton of Bermuda names that have Kittitian connections. The Augustus family, the Amories or the Amories, the Brown spelled without the E and with the E, Benjamin, Barclay, Byron, Baisden,
Or Barclay.
Bridgewater, Blacks, the Rochester family, the Patrick family, Charles, the Christopher family, Liebert, Keynes, Davis, Cannoneer family, Gishards, Douglas, Hendricksons, Dublin, Glassford, Edwards, Francis family, Taylor family, Famous, Poxon family, Grant, Godwin, the Otleys family, Gums, Jeffers, Galloway, Jones, Listers, Mortons, Porn, Lewis, Phipps, Paris, Matthew, with the S, without the S, Mills, Maynard, Nisbets, Ross, Rogers, Seaton, Simon, Simmons, Simon spelled with the Y, Simons that's spelled with the I, Thomas, Terrell, Hodge, Hutchinson, Richards, oh no, not you, Esdale, Horton, Harris, Rebane, Peets, Tuckett, York, Wade, Warner, Woodley, Webb, with the double B, E, as well as without that double B and E. Jacob, Carey, Charles, Archibald, Woods, Adams, Govier, or Govier, Morris, Weeks, Franks, Bradshaw, Season. When you think of it, those are many names, Bermudian names, that are in your telephone directory. And if you travel to St. Kitts, you'd find much of a similar listing of names because the connection is there. Okay? So the lady boats brought numbers of people here, and they came in and they worked and they settled here, and they settled in Pembroke, in Devonshire, and in Somerset. And in many of those places, you find the St. Kitts Bermuda connection still very strong. It is almost fair to say that many of the houses that were built in those parishes were also built with Kittitian and Nevidian experiences. And I tried to find a bit of information on that. and talking to Mr. George Leon Burt, who is one of our master construction builders here, he said the Nisbets, Ifa Nisbet's father, was one of the construction bosses that built many of those houses along Parsons Road. Right. And so it was wonderful to hear. And where is he from? From St. Kitts, in fact, from Nevis. Okay? And so the connection has been there for many years. Many families arrived with very little, but they worked hard and they provided for their children. There remained a strong sense of community with them. I think we still have it in some cases. It is very true to note those houses that were built in these parishes were possibly built by Caribbean folk. And I want to say that not just Kittitians and Nevisians, but Jamaicans, Trinidadians, they came in around the same time, settled and made business for themselves and for their families in order to survive. Okay? Let me see. Today, we reflect on things that we share with our Caribbean roots. We share food, we share family ties, children's games. You know the games, pitching marbles, skipping, hopscotch.
Yes.
I'm sure you did it in your country.
Definitely.
I'm sure you did it in yours. I'm sure you did it in yours as well. We did it in St. Kitts. Our people brought them up. Their children learned these things and carried on. Calypso, gambes, carnival, limbo dancing. Those came through with our Caribbean people that came and settled here. Friendly societies, gift clubs. The friendly societies helped the destitute to save their money, helped the Caribbean people and anyone else who was in their neighborhood to save their money. And they did a gift club. And those people would receive that money at specific times, maybe in times of dire need, but also in times of Christmas and birthdays where the families wanted to have celebrations. That gift club money would come in handy for taking care of that business. Okay? So friendly societies and gift clubs were the things that helped to keep this community spirit alive among our people. And I want to say that they came in and they worked hard as maybe the ladies as servants in houses. They worked as caretakers for people's children. The husbands maybe worked as carriage drivers in the times when we didn't have cars and they depended on delivery of goods. They worked as dock workers. They worked as masons and blacksmiths and carpenters. They were not afraid to struggle and to work hard and save their monies, but they instilled in their children the importance of education. They may have come in with little, and they may have had to work really hard to make their lives here, but they instilled in their children the importance of education. And so they made sure that their children and their grandchildren had the chance to go to school and get a level of education that made them become leaders in the community. And quoting from Mr. Honorable Chris Famous's research, he shared a number of House of Assembly government leaders that I want to just share with you. Freddie Yearwood, he was a wealthy Kittitian man who settled here, who became involved in business and housing. I think he was on one of our coins, money, dollar bills. Dr. Wilbur Warner, Wendell Brown, Robert Wilson, Joe Mills, Arnold Francis, Canon Nisbet, Dame Lois Brown Evans, Florence Maxwell, who was a Webb, Charles Webb, her brother, Freddie Wade, Craig Cannonier, Walter, Dennis and Terry Lister, Alan Douglas, Nikki Saunders, Shonette Wolfe, Jason Hayward, Mariko Thomas, Elizabeth Christopher, Cole Trott, Wentworth Christopher. All of these were prominent people in our community who we look up to today. And it's their parents that helped to make the way for them to be who we are and to celebrate who we are today. If I could just close, I want to say that, and let me find my note. I want to say that these specialists and parliamentarians played a major role in making modern-day Bermuda. Today we stand proud. We stand tall as we reflect on the achievements of our ancestors who gave us a foundation of strength, knowledge, and grit to overcome and succeed. And today our place is successful. Bermuda is successful because the generations have worked hard. Yes, we're struggling with the COVID crisis right now. I believe we will come through. The older generation reminded us that we've got to work together. We've got to stick together to make our island home the success that it can continue to be. One final bit, if I could share about St. Kitts today. I don't necessarily want to push my home country, but I know that in St. Kitts there is a growing opportunity for tourism. They came from sugar, they had to find a way, they chose tourism. And it's worked for them. It's helped the country to grow, it's helped the country to become modernized, okay? It is 3 times the size of St. Kitts, but it's mountainous, it's volcanic. Nevis is 36 square miles, so both islands are larger than St. Kitts. And if I were to put a plug in, St. Kitts is being very modernly developed, and there's always opportunity for growth. I'm sure you could go online, you could see how many hotels are being built. Yes, COVID has threatened the economy just as it's threatened us here, so there's a need to rebuild and to refocus the economy there, but they're going to work hard, just like we're going to work hard. They've got universities stationed there, Ross Veterinarian School of Medicine, the Windsor Medical School, the University of Medicine and Health Services where they train nurses. These are foreign companies that are settled there, bringing in business to the country. They've got vacation properties. They're building like Bermuda is building, and they're building with water tanks underground, as Bermuda is skilled at doing right now. So there's knowledge that you have that you can share with our Caribbean islands to the south. There's citizenship by investment. If you are wealthy, you can go and invest your money there, and there are opportunities there for you. They host a number of events that draw people in, celebratory events, of course, carnival, music festival, cricket, Latin festival, because there's a large growing Latin population there. So there are activities that draw people in. We can learn from each other. We can learn from the south, they can learn from us here in the north, and we can help each other. Our roots are connected. Let's grow together. Let's rebuild together. Thank you.
Very good. Very well done. So I was actually going to ask about the water catch. I know that it's often style, but there are neighborhoods in some Caribbean islands that may not have access to fresh water, and therefore that Bermuda-style water catch would be beneficial to them for freshwater catch necessity.
Yeah.
You know, I know in Canada and the States, some guys have the step roofs, but it's just for looks. You know, it's not necessarily a necessity. But as you did state in your presentation, that that is now becoming more popular as far as a necessity is concerned. You know, so I thought that was very interesting. You had a lot of names on your list. I think you named everybody.
Besides me, besides my mother, I understand.
Yep.
I understand.
There
Sorry
are
about that.
so many deep connections,
Yes.
right? And I did a presentation some time back, and people called me up, you didn't put my parents' name on it.
Yes.
And so the list gets expanded,
Yes.
right?
But many people don't know.
Yes.
Many people don't really realize.
I could say that a lot of the resources that I chose to get, I just want to put that out there, because right at our museum, our National Museum in Bermuda, the story has begun there. The newspapers, the Royal Gazette, at some point in time, I got an old article that also pointed to some of our root people's stories, right? So the Royal Gazette has those stories. The Bermuda National Museum has the stories. If you go to the museum in St. Kitts, the National Museum in St. Kitts, you're going to get that similar story of the connection. The Bonham C. Richardson's book, written, and he entitled his book Caribbean Migrants, has much of what I shared as well. So my research came from resources, reliable resources where you can find it too, okay? I could tag on the water situation in the Caribbean is, I think everyone has access to fresh water. I think that people are realizing though that they could collect their own water right from their roofs, as Bermudians do. There are, they have reservoirs that collect huge bodies of water, and those waters are piped to individual houses in the places. But I think people are realizing, maybe for health reasons, maybe for just personal modern growth, that you could collect your own water from your roof and you could have it in your tank at your house. And so many of the modern houses are being built with the tanks, just as Bermudians have done for years. Okay?
I know in Jamaica there are some Bermuda-style homes, but it's more for looks, right?
Well, the water catchment system is being practiced now a lot more, where a lot more people who have experience working here or live there, bring back home building. In some areas in St. Anne's, I learned recently, it's been practiced for a long time. Not sure why. Maybe they came from Bermuda many years ago.
Yeah.
But people are realizing that it makes sense, and definitely it's the way to go.
I did see step roof in Canada, and I was trying to find out if it was influenced by Bermuda or it was just a coincidence. I actually met some guys here, which is part of my new way of thinking, actually, because Canadians, some guys had German last names. The accent's tougher than mine. You know what I mean? I meet Filipinos, you know, they've never been to the Philippines. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm prejudging them, thinking that they're from the Philippines when they know nothing about the Philippines. You know, they were born here, raised here, same with the Portuguese. So I think that, you know, back in the day, before travel, airplanes and ships, you could probably look at somebody and have a guess, you know, what continent they're from. But now, That's totally irrelevant. And what we have to recognize is what we have in common. And I think that our community has to grow its own self-identity. We could care less, what the person looks like that goes to the Olympics. Just bring home the gold for us in a story. And I think that a lot of what's happening in the United States right now is miseducation. They're all Americans. All of them are Americans. And they're fighting against each other over stupidity, in my opinion. And I don't think that they totally understand what they're fighting over. I understand, everything comes from somewhere. Even rumors have a starting point. But at the same time, I think if we recognize what the actual point is and what we're trying to achieve, it can be done collectively as a group. And I think that what we don't want is to have that type of situation here at all. Bermuda is susceptible to overseas influence that cannot be denied. But you want to separate the positivity from the negative. That has to happen once it gets here. None of us have been through a COVID-19. We all have to work together. The lockdown, nobody really liked it. But we had to do that in order to contain the virus, so it didn't spread amongst our community. And now everybody wants to jump up and start working. We know that, but we cannot, throw caution to the wind at the same time. So through collective communication and correct education, I believe, would only help us grow our community to be a better place, so that we can be that tourist destination once again, that overseas international business location. So what I don't want to do is focus on groups and segments and overlook others, because we're all in this together. No matter if you're here for a day or you've been here for 4 or 5 generations. Once you step foot in Bermuda, it's a different type of rules. I mean, for the most part, we got along. One of the things that I took as a compliment was we did a project with an English contractor, and he said, in England, guys only talk to their own groups, and that's it. But in Bermuda, an electrician would jump on the back of a bike with a plumber, a carpenter with his best friends, with HVAC guy. It don't matter. Guys just get along. And that is something that's unique. One, because we're a small community, everybody knows each other for the most part. But I think that is something that we don't understand, that that's actually our strength, to have that close-knit community. And we have to supply that with more positive energy. And I do appreciate all of you for coming here. I know a lot of people had questions. I'm not sure what I'm getting into, and that's fine. But at the same time, we want to make sure that everyone that's in Bermuda has a voice. Everyone that's here, you have a say, you have a right, and if you have any issues, you can bring them up. And if you want to share, like I learned a bunch today. I didn't realize half the stuff that you guys were going to bring up. I think that's good, and I want to talk to you guys more. I know you have time that we're going to make, but I really want to hear from you guys more on your backgrounds and how we came to this point. So I do appreciate you guys, and thank you for showing up. I did want a small group, and that is good. It's recorded, so if anyone wants to tap into later, and I'm sure that Premier and his ministers will be interested in hearing the outcome of our meeting today. We meet every 3 months, different location, different theme, different topics. And at the end of the year, we have the awards. And that is where we celebrate. Many of these meetings here are serious. COVID-19, we have racial tensions, and we have a hurricane season. That's not fun to talk about, but we have to talk about it, right? But with the awards, that's the fun night, where we can celebrate, have a good time, have a laugh, and enjoy ourselves. So I do want you guys to understand more of why we're here and what we're doing. But I didn't want to limit you guys. Like, I know a lot of people, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about. Even Ms. Tanix was like, what do you want to say? And I said, say what you want, do what you want. But that gives you the freedom to now share with us your background. If I tell you what to say, you're only going to say what I tell you to say. I didn't know half that stuff. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I do want you guys' input. Go ahead.
Well, her presentation just showed that, of course, it took many people from different locations to make Bermuda what it is. Yeah. And as she pointed out, Bermuda is a successful place. Successful, peaceful, progressive. I think all countries go through evolution over hundreds and thousands of years. What Bermuda looks like now, 50 years might be something different. What America looked like now is not what it looked like 600 years ago. What Rome looked like now is not what it looked like 1,000 years ago. So we all have to understand that we process, each country goes through a process. People come from different races, different background, different country to make a location or country what it is, or what it can become. And the sooner we realize we need to come together, adopt, accept each other, then the more we can make progress and move forward. Yeah. And make our country what it needs to be 50 years from now or 100 years from now. An example, or the ideal country that the Atlantis or something that everyone can look forward to modeling their country after. Yeah. And Bermuda is unique in many aspects. I'm a mason by trade. Buildings are first class, world class, and your water catchment system, the roofing system, your design, it's just different. So we have a lot to do, a lot to learn, and a lot to offer the world.
It's been here 20 years now, so it's no longer Canadian. He can't represent Canada anymore.
Yeah.
True iron.
Yeah.
As they say.
Well, guys, if anything else, it's been an hour. Anything else you guys, if you have any questions for me? I don't have a plan for September yet because of COVID. I still am holding the November booking for the awards until told otherwise. And if we are told otherwise, it will give us more time to plan anyway. But if there is another theme you guys want to have for September, if there are any issues that pop up between now and then, please feel free, and I'll be happy to host. And we can have a different location, have a different theme, different topics. But we want to make sure that everyone has a voice, everyone's concerns are met in these meetings. Okay, guys, if there's anything else, let me know. Everybody good so far? Okay. No? All right, well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let go.
Bar opens at 3, I think. I'm just